In the late 18th century, large deposits of coal were discovered in England, a country struggling due to a scarcity of available farmland. This coal provided a viable fuel source for several industries, which set off a series of innovations in manufacturing, textiles, agriculture, and transportation that revolutionized the country. For the first time in human history, a society had an industrial economy rather than an agrarian one. These innovations spread across Europe and eventually made their way to the United States. Gradually, the Northeast United States mechanized and reformed their economy in the interest of industry. The new economy fit in nicely with the American philosophy of capitalism. By the late 1800s, the United States was the top manufacturer in the world. This drastic shift in economy brought broad changes to the workplace. The majority of the American workforce no longer worked as part of a sparsely populated agrarian system, but rather migrated to the cities to work in big factories. Society soon split into a small contingent of wealthy factory owners and a vast majority of poorer factory workers. Most industrial bosses sought to expand their profits by using this abundant supply of cheap labor. There were few regulations on management's ability to use its workers in unsafe, unsanitary workplaces for excessively long workdays. Many laborers, even children, were badly injured in these awful conditions without any compensation. As workers' rights were increasingly taken away, they discovered that their main strength was in their numbers. One worker could not stand up against their factory and ask for basic workers' rights, as he would be replaced by another worker and lose his job. To truly gain rights, workers had to organize themselves and use their numbers to their advantage. The answer came in the form of labor unions. Unions, in essence, were created to open the debate between the employer and the employees. They were run by workers who were willing to step up and mediate conflicts between the two parties. Through many compromises, early labor unions began to bridge the gap between the workers and the owners. Unions started at the local level, generally organizing by craft. Only until the mid-19th century did unions start organizing on a national level. The first effective labor union in the United States was the National Labor Union, or the NLU. It was founded in 1866 off the back of a failed coalition among smaller local unions. Its main purpose was to make the 8-hour workday standard. The NLU had mixed success. They succeeded in campaigning for an 8-hour workday for government employees, but wages were cut alongside hours. The NLU also supported the exclusion of the Chinese and did little to address the rights of women and blacks. This, along with their dwindling membership, led to the decline of the National Labor Union. The next major nationwide union was the Knights of Labor. Many proponents from the NLU switched over and supported this new organization. The Knights were a major union that incorporated both skilled and unskilled workers, which greatly added to their membership. They quickly became a nationwide labor union as a result of the decline of the NLU. In addition to pushing for an 8-hour workday, the Knights petitioned for an end to both child and convict labor. By the mid-1880s, the Knights of Labor were the biggest labor organization in the United States, with membership in the 700,000s. Another major organization promoting workers' rights was the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions, or FOTLU. It was created in 1881 and also focused on the 8-hour workday, as well as the abolishment of child labor and convict labor. The FOTLU was fairly disorganized and did not work well nationally. Although the FOTLU allowed women to join, its membership did not grow much from its early beginnings. It remained a relatively small operation. These early labor unions were generally ineffective at accomplishing their goals, especially the mythical 8-hour workday. They also managed to tarnish their names by being involved with violence and anarchy, as demonstrated by the notorious Haymarket Riots that took place in Chicago. The Haymarket Riots, although an immediate setback for widespread unionization at the time, ultimately created the path for greater diplomacy between the employers and employees, as unions helped workers gain rights in the workplace. It marked the beginning of a new era of open and peaceful debate between the two groups. In an effort to make an 8-hour workday standard, the FOTLU stated that if May 1, 1886 was not an 8-hour day, workers across the nation would join together in a coordinated strike. Employers did not heed this warning, causing mass strikes to break out all across the nation. The May 1st strikes compounded with a strike held at the McCormick Harvesting Machine Company in Chicago just 2 days later. A lengthy lockout of the McCormick workers resulted in a violent confrontation between the laborers and the strikebreakers. At the end of the workday, the locked-out workers stormed the plant. The police shot into the crowd, and several workers were wounded, and 2 were killed. In response, several anarchists printed posters calling for a mass meeting the next day in Haymarket Square. Workers congregated the night of the 4th, listening to speeches given by several protesters and labor activists. The meeting, which was supposed to be nonviolent, took a turn for the worse. Around 10:30, when the protest was winding down, the police demanded that the crowd disperse immediately. Due to the police brutality from the previous day, chaos erupted among the crowd. Then, out of nowhere, a pipe bomb was thrown into the group of police. In the confusion following the blast, the police opened fire into the crowd. After the incident, it was found that several policemen were injured by the bomb, but the majority of the wounds were sustained by gunshot, largely due to friendly fire. 7 policemen and many civilians died. Over 100 police officers and civilians were wounded, but the number is unclear because many were afraid to seek medical attention, fearing arrest. 8 men were tried for the crime of throwing the bomb, and were found guilty because of their inflammatory statements. 4 men were hanged and 1 committed suicide while in jail. However, it was conceded later that none of the men actually threw the bomb. The trial is known as one of the biggest legal shams in American history. Initially, the Haymarket tragedy was a major setback for the unions. The public viewed the unions, especially the Knights of Labor and the FOTLU, as anarchists and socialists who incited violence as a means of getting what they wanted. These unions, having lost their public support, slowly disappeared or repositioned themselves. The Knights of Labor soon fell apart. Upon its creation, it consisted of both skilled and unskilled workers. This approach would seemingly give the union more strength, but the organization of the union led to internal conflict. The Haymarket affair also tarnished the once decent reputation of the Knights, and it eventually dissolved. The FOTLU, after years of poor management and stagnant membership, eventually changed their name and realigned themselves to become the American Federation of Labor, or the AFL. Many of the craft unions from the Knights were incorporated into the AFL, and thus the AFL grew rapidly around the United States. The AFL exemplified a new breed of organized labor union. It only allowed skilled workers membership, changing the power of the union in the process. The AFL also rejected socialism, which helped it gain public support. It promoted cross-craft cooperation, a rarity in previous organizations. The violent events at Haymarket Square became a turning point in the history of labor in America. Early labor unions and labor activists were ineffective at advocating for workers' rights. The Haymarket Riots marked the end of the old labor unions, like the FOTLU and the Knights of Labor, which were viewed as radical subversives. In their place, a host of new, better labor organizations capable of creating safer and fairer workplaces were created. The struggle for workers' rights was a new development due to the Industrial Revolution, but it did not end in the 1800s. Unions did not become obsolete by the turn of the century, nor by the mid-1900s. Even today, unions are important mediators between workers and employers. Due to the recent recession, most states have suffered great economic hardships. In February, in an effort to balance Wisconsin's state budget, Governor Scott Walker proposed a bill that would enact devastating cuts to many states' employees' pensions and benefits. This bill would also strip unions of their collective bargaining rights. Although the legality and enforcement of the bill are still being disputed today, many other union-busting bills have sprung up in states such as Ohio, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. The current situation shows us that labor rights will never be fully earned. Unions will never be obsolete. From the Haymarket Riots to Wisconsin's union crisis, American labor was, is, and will always be a struggle.